Howdy, Kirk. How are
Hi,
you
Sheldon.
today?
It's hard to be sitting here in front of a computer. It's just gorgeous out there. The sugar maples and the red oaks are just ablaze in autumn colors. The sky is completely blue, not a cloud. And it's so warm out there today. It's just, and here I am indoors. But
We can actually come back later.
no,
We can
the
just
weekend.
hit stop and go away for a little bit because it's gorgeous here too. Like it's supposed
Oh,
to be
yeah.
20 today,
Yeah.
20, and it is a little bit windy because October in Manitoba is the time where the leaves will fall off the trees, regardless of how
Yep.
nice it is, because the wind will it'll pick up the tree and just shake it and then put it back in.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I have two aspens that I brought here from Manitoba. I dug them up on my dad's farm. And those are interesting because I got other aspens here that are Ontario aspens, same species, but the Manitoba aspens always drop their leaves a couple of weeks ahead of the Ontario ones. So I just went out this morning, took a look at seeing how the aspen trees are doing in Manitoba. I just took a look at those two out of my front yard, and yeah, there's hardly any leaves left on them.
Yeah, we're about a third left. We have an aspen out in the
Yeah,
front yard. And
yeah, I'd say
yeah,
about a
we got a
third
third.
here. The Ontario ones have hardly started even dropping their leaves. They've,
Interesting. Very interesting. It gets in that habit.
yeah, and I
Have
am
you
had,
had frost yet? Because we've had some
yeah,
cool nights.
we've had a few slightly frosty nights, and last night what I would be calling a killing frost. It was down to about -3 degrees Celsius below zero, below freezing. And I went out there this morning, and my poor habanero plant, my beloved habanero plant, well, it's gone off to that great habanero garden in the sky. There's the few remaining peppers are done, I
No,
think.
no more sweat coming from that plant.
No, but I do have a bunch in the kitchen I'm planning to
Nice,
start on tonight.
nice, nice, nice. Yeah, that's it's that time of year when it could snow here any minute, or it
Right,
could be
yeah.
shorts weather. I'm wearing shorts today just because I'm holding on as long as I
Yeah,
possibly can.
yeah.
But yeah, it could snow. Never know. All right. Well, before we get into it, I just want to welcome everybody watching and those of you that are going to watch later. This is a potentially emotional video live stream. I do have my tissues here just in case, because we're going to be talking about some tough stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, share your story in the comments or in the live chat. And if you want to talk to anyone or you want prayer or anything like that, just head over to kirkdurston.com and you can talk to us there as well. Yeah, so those of you who watched last week's video, you would have heard a little bit of the story. But Kirk, why don't you share again? And maybe before we start, over the years, you've posted a number of articles on your website about grief, losing child. Now, had you ever lost a child before?
No,
So
no.
I'm sure people would have been reading those articles, going, "Well, it's easy for him to say."
Yeah, well, I mean, we had not, we still have not lost one of our own personal, like direct first generation children. But when I wrote that article, we had a lot of friends who have close friends, people that I'd meet together with every week had lost children, and I listened to their stories, and and then along came the loss of our grandchild, and I know that people will say it's one step removed, and I acknowledge that it is one step removed. But there was something different about the grandchild, like something I didn't expect, and that is I not only felt but I got the word. It was a text in the morning. I got the word, and I felt an instant kind of sorrow and grief that was so strong. I almost felt physically sick. And I have felt deep, hard grief before, to the point where it actually is work to take the next breath. You have to almost consciously tell your body, okay, another breath here. And this goes on, and you're not sure how you can make it through the day. And I just say, God, help me make it through this day, because I think I'm going to suffocate just from the grief. So there was that, but then there was another thing that came along, and I didn't expect it until the day of the funeral. And this was watching my own daughter in agony and not being able to make it better. There's something, I didn't expect that. That was even harder for me, because as a parent, you always want to protect your kids, and if they hurt themselves or something's gone wrong, you want to fix it and help them. But there was I couldn't make her grief go away, and I'll say this, I can't even imagine what it's like, and I think no man can imagine what it's like to carry a child that you're eagerly and excitedly looking forward to her arrival, and just 2 days before the delivery date, the child stops moving. And then, so they induce, and they find the child appeared to be perfectly healthy, active, 8 pounds, 7 ounces, but the cord was tightly around her torso, and the only explanation they have is that somehow the cord got crimped off or something, and the child was deprived of, and just passed on right there. So close, and yet this. And so there was 2 aspects to this that the second aspect is grieving, is grieving for your own child who is going through agony at the same time, and not being able to make it go away. All you can do is just be there. As soon as I heard, I said, I'm coming. It's a 5-hour drive. My wife was already there, because wild horses can't keep her away when one of her daughters is having a baby. And for my youngest daughter, this would be number 5 for her. And for my other daughter, she has 3. And so she was already there. Everybody's pumped, looking forward to excitement and anticipation, and then all of a sudden everything changes. So my wife was already there. I drove there, and all we could do was just be there, hug from time to time, give her a hug, and just be there mostly. Just be there, do things around the house. I was working on trim on their house that they're building, but just working on trim, just doing stuff was enormously helpful for her. So, and that's the most recent thing. I lost my dad just over a year ago, and my mother roughly, I think, 6 months before that, maybe 8 months. And then several months ago, I lost one of my closest friends, one of my closest hunting and fishing buddy, who we not only did lots of fun outdoor stuff together, but we would always sit in the evening and just have really good talks. And that was fast too. There was he had a sore back, and 4 months later he's gone. So this is life after the fall of humanity. It's real. But at the same time, I'll have to say my daughter, she's still, I just read her Instagram post this morning. She's doing well, considering. Her faith is unshaken. In fact, it's stronger now than ever. And I would have to say mine is stronger than ever. There's a peace knowing that I will see my granddaughter someday. Her name was Anastasia. We call her Anastasia still, even though God says He will give us a new name, an eternal name that's really something else. I'd imagine if God gives you a name, that's an amazing name. And when I next see her, I won't see her as a baby. I'll see her as a full-blown, resurrected woman in all the glory that Jesus says we will share with him. Like, it'll be amazing. No human has ever seen a woman like that. And that's the next sight I will get of her. But yeah, so it's a hard road to walk, and there's an empty spot that will always be there. And I know that because of my other loved ones who have passed on, and nothing will fill that empty spot. It's always there.
I want to bring up this article that you wrote because there's a few paragraphs in there that were sort of punch to the gut, yet not necessarily an explanation, but a faithful exhortation of what we're going to be looking forward to. And so this is called Anastasia. It's on your website. You wrote it on October 2nd, which was the day of the funeral,
Just after she died, but about, let me see, a day or so before the funeral.
Okay.
Can't remember. It's right in between her passing and the funeral.
So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's a few paragraphs that I do want to read because I think they really explain sort of the thinking behind a number of your previous articles, as well as just what we can look forward to in this life during the process of living in the fall. This is one of them. If this life was all there was, Anastasia's brief existence here would have seemed so utterly pointless. All her potential talents, love, and abilities snuffed out before the candle even burst into flame. But this life is not all there is, and our true potential is not for this world, but for eternity in our full immortal form. Then there is this one. This life is the doorstep into eternity. It is not the main event. God describes our mortal lives here as like a vapor, a flower that today is and tomorrow is gone. It is like a dream that you had in the night, but in the morning cannot recall what it was about. Yet tragically, most people live in this world as if this is all there is.
Mm-hmm.
As you've gone through this emotional process, that faith that you have in eternity, you're saying it's stronger than ever. But many people don't feel the same way when it happens to them. What is it that makes that difference?
That's a tough question. It's a very tough question and I think what makes it really hard is because I'm not inside their hearts and minds when they suffer the same devastation in their own lives. I can only say what has made the difference for me. And that is that ever since I was a preschooler, I grew up on a farm, on a cattle and grain farm, and I saw death since I was probably 3 years old. Our dog was run over out on the road, and I saw his last minutes of life. Cows would die sometimes, and I found out that we do too as a little kid. And to me, that became the big, all-consuming question in my life. At that point, it was the worst thing that could ever happen. It was my greatest fear. And at the same time, I heard about heaven and God, and I had actually my first experience with God was alone outside at night as a preschooler, looking at billions of stars and a velvet black sky, and it seemed God was everywhere but yet so far away. And anyways, how do I put this shortly? To put it in short, I have always known I was going to die, and back then, I needed to get that problem solved. And it was solved. My mother told me that that I could have eternal life. The thing that was keeping me back was my own sin and my own spiritual death from God. But she says, you can ask Jesus into your heart, as she put it. She's speaking in kid language here. And but she says, if you do that, you're going to belong to God, not to us. She said, we already belong to God, Dad and her, but you will too. We'll still care for you and everything else, but you belong to God. And so ever since, I have always grown up feeling that my home is not here. It's in eternity. And I've always seen the end of my life. I'm not talking about how it ends. I'm talking about there is an end. I'm very aware of it. And I know exactly what's on the other side. And I'm staking everything on this. And I have. So when these, and I've had several close relatives and friends die in the last few years. When my faith grows stronger, all I can say is that my heart, every time a loved one dies who I know has eternal life, and I have known some pass on who, as far as I knew, they had no interest in this, and that's a whole different story. It's a whole different story. But for those, they pass on. I know where they are, and my heart feels more and more in eternity. And somehow, I see that if this isn't true, everything is a complete and utter joke, as I think Shakespeare puts it in Hamlet. What would that be? He says, as like an actor strutting back and forth on the stage. Oh man, if I could, maybe you can find it while I talk here. It's just classic quote. And I'm a philosopher. And I know that people will deny that this life is a complete and utter joke without God, because we can always make up some purpose and meaning. But I'm a philosopher, and I'm smart enough to know that I just made it up. And in the end, this whole thing was a sick joke. And why is it sick? It's because it has a not very nice ending. It's all the fun I'm having and all the good times and all my friends and loved ones and everything else. This doesn't end well. I know that. I mean, you don't have to be a theist to observe that. It does not end well. Death is not I've been at the final minutes and days of people's, it's not nice. So I would have to say that somehow, and I don't know how, my faith and trust in God just continues to grow stronger. Maybe faith is the kind of thing that grows stronger when you actually
have to use it.
Use it. Yeah, it's like a muscle. When you have to use it, the bad situation either blows away what you imagined was faith, but then it leaves behind the real stuff. And the question is there anything left behind after all the imaginary faith has been blown away? And now you have to face, do I actually believe this or not? And it's not I thought it wasn't an intellectual decision when I heard about Anastasia. It was more of a heartfelt response. I know where she is. I'm going to see her again. And I am so thankful for eternal life. And I'd say my daughter's the same, and her husband, Lucas.
So Serpa's shared a little bit of his story of losing his brother.
Yeah, no warning at all. That is hard. And left behind his wife and 2 young sons. That is, I think that's even harder to, it doesn't even make sense. He needs to take care of his wife, and he needs to help raise his sons. And then this happens. Just doesn't make sense.
So what does it look like when someone sees God as always good So I once had somebody write into me and say, if God is omnibenevolent, so always good, why does he let bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. I would say that's one of the top three questions of humanity, if they consider the existence of God. If you don't believe in God, then that's just the way it is. Suck it up and press on. But if you contemplate the existence of God, that's the number one. And I actually did a graduate degree on that question, like in philosophy at a secular university, and I spent, I think it was 4 years on this subject, reading courses, writing a thesis, writing papers, getting them published in philosophy journals. Pretty hard to summarize it, but there's two ways you can look at it. There's just the analytical way, and that is, if you've ever heard anything about the butterfly effect, that is, every event that occurs in this world leads to an exponentially increasing number of consequences unfolding into the future, affecting more causal chains all the time. And so you can't just look at, should God have allowed the event, but you also have to look out at what is the net moral value of literally billions of consequences into the future to the end of human rule. You have to look at all that, and quite simply, and this was the heart of my thesis, no human is in a position to crunch those numbers. We don't even know what the variables and the values of those variables are. We're just completely lost. So one thing I do know is that the more information a person has versus his buddy who knows nothing, the more likely it is that the guy who knows a lot of information about the situation is going to make a decision that his buddy doesn't understand. And we see it all the time. Parents with children don't understand why you can't have ice cream every day, or why you had to get this needle. I remember Mom dragging me in as a preschooler to the clinic to get a needle. It was probably either for smallpox or polio, I can't remember which, because it was only about 2 back then. And to my horror, when I saw the needle come out, I fought for my life, but to my absolute dismay, my mom was helping them out. She wasn't helping me. She was helping them.
Tragic. That's all trust in the lady at that point, right?
It's a horrible sense of betrayal for a little kid. And my mom tried to explain, it's for the better, all this kind of stuff. But so that's one aspect, the analytical point of view. There's another, God does give us hints in the Bible sometimes why he allows this to happen. For example, there was a little boy, Jeroboam's son, he talks about. Jeroboam's family was going to get annihilated because they were totally evil. And the little boy was sick. And the mom went to see the prophet to see, is my little boy going to get better again? And the prophet says, well, first of all, Jeroboam and his entire family, everybody is going to get wiped out. They'll be like dog poop on the face of the earth, literally, because the dogs would eat the corpses. But, he says, the moment your feet cross the threshold of your city, your little boy will die. Now, if he had just stopped there, that would be brutal. But he didn't. He says, for in him alone, in the sight of God, has something good been found. Now, God, he's presenting this as if he's doing the little boy a favor. This is really good news for the little boy, terrible news for the mother. And this is often the way it works. It's not just about me as a grandfather or me as a husband or whatever. This isn't all, the passing of other loved ones is not just about how I'm going to feel afterwards. And God, we do feel awful, and there's nothing wrong with that. Jesus wept when he saw the other people weeping and grieving for Lazarus. He wept for them. It says when he looked and saw everybody weeping, Jesus wept, shortest verse in the Bible, one of the most powerful verses in the Bible. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not just about Lazarus, or it's not just about his survivors, it's not just about me. The other thing, it was a reward actually for the little boy, and this is what I remembered about Anastasia immediately, because I've written an article, as you mentioned, the death of a child, is that some people, we can only infer, it's the only inference really left to us is that some people do not need to endure this world. And I use the word endure on purpose because I'm getting older now. When you're young, you think of this world, hey, YOLO, you only live once, let's have a really good time and let's just party and we're having a good time. But as you grow older, you become more and more aware of all the other stuff in this world. There's a lot of beautiful things, which I call the aroma of God in this world, beauty and honor and love, but there's all the other things, and you become more aware of that. And a little child will often, we know, they're taken, like Anastasia was, or like this little boy, the son of Jeroboam, because they don't need to endure this world. They're taken out of it. God has done them a huge favor. There are lots of things by my age I wished I'd never known about. I'm pretty careful when I read the news. I'll get the headlines. I want to keep in touch with what's going on, but I don't want to know the details. When they started, there's lots of things, I don't even want to mention them, that are available as far as details on the news. I've seen enough already. So the other thing is, what about older people? You know, older people who are good people. There's one verse in Isaiah, I'll just read it. It says, "The righteous man perishes, and no one lays it to heart." That is, no one really that didn't make sense. To continue the quote, "Devout men are taken away while no one understands." And he's using the term man and man generically here. More often than not, it was young women who died in childbirth, and I've visited cemeteries that date back the 1800s, and it's very sobering to see the number of women between the ages of 18 to 25 who are buried there, and they don't say on the tombstone, but pretty sure they died in childbirth. It says, "No one understands," and then I continue the quote because he's giving the reason here. "For the righteous man is taken away from calamity. He enters into peace. They rest in their beds who walk in their uprightness." And for whatever reasons, and I think it's dangerous almost, if not definitely simplistic, to look at a particular person who died at a particular time and say, oh, well, I think this good came out of it over here, and point to something. That's not the only consideration. There are, like I said before, there are going to be millions and then eventually billions of consequences from the death of just one person in history who died out of too soon, as from our perspective. So, yeah, already my article on Anastasia, over 2,000 people have read that, and I know they're reading that because they're spending an average of 5 minutes reading that article, and it doesn't take 5 minutes to read. At least, I don't know.
That article's linked in the description of the video here for those of you who might be looking for it.
And I have got already a lot of emails saying how helpful, how much they appreciated that article. There are people suffering through grief of their own or questioning, and they've read that article, and it may not have, that doesn't take away the grief, but it does help take one more step closer to God, and maybe in their own faith and trust in Him, that at the end of the day, we're all going to die, but there is a future, an eternal future.
Serpa, yep.
At the end, that's my only rock and comfort. I could look for comfort from other people, but if that's all I had, I would know they're going to die too. Like, we're all in this together. We're on this kind of like runaway train. The bridge is out up ahead, and we're all going over. And if you bail sooner, you're still going to get killed. So, but knowing what Serpa says here, God is my rock and my comfort. And sometimes there's been times where it's so brutal. All I can do is read some Psalms, and I find the Psalms somehow speak to my heart. And I know that I'm supposed to be a tough man and macho and everything else. But I will confess that there are times where I just sit back in the arms of God. I just like a little boy who needs his dad. And my Father in heaven, there you go.
I know when we were talking about what to talk about today, you wanted to talk about eternity. And so why don't we spend the last time today talking about maybe resurrection through eternity. What does that look like, and how does it give us hope?
Yeah, all my life I've lived for that, I'll tell you. I mean, I'm having a good time, Sheldon. I don't want to give the impression I'm just suffering along in this life. And I think, to be honest with you, I've been around the world. I've worked in developing countries, and I think a lot of people, like, let's be honest here, I've had a good life despite some of the loss of loved ones. Now, that being said, he does say some things about eternity. There are some things that really, here's one that I really, really like. And that is, again, a quote from Isaiah in the Old Testament. But there's a lot of statements in the Old Testament which were written before the time of Christ that talk about the final days of humanity and then eternity. And this is one of them. And I'll read it. It says, "For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in that which I create." So there's the first point I would like to say, is that I once had an experience where I don't know what it was. And it was so powerful. Like, I couldn't really talk about it without losing my composure. But part of that experience was like I had died and I couldn't remember a thing about my life. Not a thing. I knew I had one. At least I was pretty sure I did. But it was like a dream in the night. And I was pretty sure I had a dream last night, but I don't remember what it was about. And first of all, there was such an enormous sense of freedom and relief like I have never experienced in my life. And I didn't realize how much the suffering of this world weighs heavily on every one of us, and we just live in it. We get used to it, and we don't realize what we carry, what the memories. I can be having a perfectly good time with my family, say at the Thanksgiving dinner, but knowing that there's people around the world that are not having a good time, I know about that, and it does. I don't know. There's a compassion that detracts from I can't just enjoy, because I know about everything else in the world. I know a lot of other stuff. So to not remember, to know that there will come a day when the heaven and earth will pass away, God says, and a new cosmos, a new earth will be created where there is no memory of evil, where will never be evil. You may not even know what that is, and it's all 100% good unleashed. And when I say good unleashed, I'm talking about God as the origin of every good thing given and every perfect gift. Now, that being said, I do think, here's my argument, I do think we'll remember those, we'll know the other people that we have loved, and here's why, because I think true love, the real thing, I'm not talking about dogs in the heat like what you see on a movie. I'm talking about real love. That is, there's something supernatural and divine and eternal about that. And so the love that my wife and I have for each other, that we have for our children, when I see her in eternity, she will not look probably like she looks now. Like I said, there's another verse that says when the Lord returns in glory, we will, the reference escapes me in the exact wording, but we will appear in glory like him. He will have a face brighter than the sun. C.S. Lewis says, if you were He writes this, I think, in Mere Christianity. He says, if you were to see a resurrected human in the future with their full, immortal, godlike capabilities and godlikeness, it would be a creature that if you were to see that now, you would just be tempted to fall down and worship, even though you shouldn't. That's just a resurrected human, but with their full immortal aspects. So there's that about it. There's another thing about eternity that I really like. So it's not like we forget. I don't know who I like. I don't know who Anastasy. I think it'll be a reunion, but I don't want to remember. I definitely do not want to remember anything. This world. It was like in that experience, like everything in my life had melted down, and nothing was left of my life except for two things: me, and then a swirling kind of cloud of golden, hard to describe, billions of golden crystals reflecting the light swirling all around me. And I knew, nobody told me this, and this all happened within seconds, I knew that somehow all the good things I'd ever done for eternity, and I couldn't tell you what a single good thing was back then because I'd forgotten it all. It had all melted down and it was all been converted into that. Now, don't make any Christian doctrine based on this experience.
Oh, come on, I'm writing a book as you speak.
Yeah. All I can say is that this verse here, when he says the former things will not come to mind, and nor will they be remembered, I am so excited. I like, that's a ways down the road, because if you know prophecy, there's some other stuff that has to happen and whatever. That's a ways down the road, but there is coming a day when we will live in a world. And here's another thing that he says that I really like. He says that it has not entered the heart. He says, how does he put it? Mind cannot, I'm going to paraphrase here. Mind cannot comprehend, nor has it entered the heart of humanity, what God has prepared for those who love him. We have no idea. We're like a caterpillar on a leaf munching away on something right now. We see a butterfly go sailing by. We don't even know what that is. I mean, no idea we're going to be something like that. In fact, sometimes I suspect God has put what you call foreshadowing of our states into this world, and metamorphosis of a sometimes disgusting looking caterpillar into a beautiful butterfly. Metamorphosis is one of those hints and suggestions that, or seeds. He uses the seed. You plant the seed in the ground and out comes that plant over there. It doesn't look anything like the seed. So don't count on me wearing glasses and having a stubble here, Sheldon, when you meet me in eternity.
Yeah. When I think of eternity, I think of a long, long time that we can't comprehend. Like when I think of eternity, I think of myself sitting in that classroom, waiting for the clock to finish clicking through to the end of class time, and how long those seconds took.
Yeah.
So when I think of eternity here on Earth, I think of it almost as a negative, where it's like, oh, man, what do you mean it's never going to end?
I know, Sheldon. I've heard that. And I've heard atheists say, why would I want to do that? I mean, some people, and Christians, I dread that, that type of thing. Although, and I can only speak for myself here, Sheldon. But the older I get, the more interests I find myself having. And I often say, boy, if I had like a bunch of lives, I would like to spend definitely one of them building beautiful furniture. Or I would like to spend a bunch of them mastering different kinds of musical instruments. And it's getting ridiculous now, Sheldon, how many lives I feel I would like to have. And then when you begin to dive into things, you realize, whoa, like I do play, you see a piano behind me. Don't ever ask me to play. I didn't play it for literally 50 years. But in recent times, I have resurrected. I'm back at it again. And now I realize I wish I had mastered an instrument. But how long does it take to master an instrument?
Lifetime.
Well, probably at least decades. I mean, if some gifted people, it might be years. But for a guy like me, it's a lifetime. my ear, my mind appreciates music and loves music. The body is not, needs a lot of work on the piano. So when you start thinking about this and you start coupling that with who God is, Jesus says this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God. And I thought years ago, so eternal life is knowing God. What's that? Like, you picture God, an old man with a white beard sitting on a cloud. I know that person. That's eternal life, and it's like a caterpillar trying to imagine what it's like to fly. But then, one of my favorite descriptions of God in the Bible is that He is the origin of every good thing given and every perfect gift. Like everything that is good and perfect, everything comes from God. He's the origin of music, of beauty, of art, of love, and honor, and you can go on and on. Well, what would it be like to live in a world where that is completely unleashed forever? So there's no end to the kind of music you can create. So you might spend just billions of years inventing different kinds of instruments and mastering this and just writing the most amazing music that no human is even capable of writing. Like, how long could you spend doing that and this and the other thing? And do you ever get tired of spending? Well, you do. I mean, I'll confess, you get tired. I get tired of spending time with loved ones, but it's only temporary because I need a break here. But year after year, I find...
I'll make sure I edit that out before I send this to your wife.
But, well, with my wife, it's different. Like, I don't get tired of spending time with her for whatever. Like, it's just amazing. But anyways, I think what I notice is that as the years go by, I value even more my time spent with my friends and relatives. Even more. Way more now than I did just 10 years ago. And if that's a taste of what eternity is like, and you've got millions of people, though I realize if you've got an infinite number of years, but if it does keep getting better, and that's the idea here, it just keeps getting better. C.S. Lewis, in another one of his books, last book in the Chronicles of Narnia, says you go ever higher up and further in. Higher up and further in. There's just no limit to how high you will ever be able to go and how far in you will ever be able to go. It'll just keep getting better forever. There's no limit to goodness and beauty and music and perfection and relationships and love and honor and so forth.
I think that might be a good place to end.
Yeah. Yep.
Unless there's
Sounds
anything you want to touch on at the end here. For those of you who are watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified when a live stream or video is coming up. And if you have comments that you want to make or questions for us, throw it in the chat, throw it in the comments, or go to kirkdurston.com. Mm-hmm. And leave a question there. Don't forget to read that article about Anastasia. There's also some really good articles on grieving, finding healing in the face of overwhelming grief, and then on the death of a child. This is an article that you wrote a while ago before Anastasia, and lots of people are reading that. And so, thank you all for watching. Kirk, any last comments?
I would say just to want to make it clear that I don't want to portray myself as if, hey, everything's fine, there's no problem when my loved one dies, that kind of stuff. No. Even now, when I think, there is that almost physical nausea that grief is there. Mm-hmm. The emptiness will always be there for the rest of this life. There's that. But at the same time, there's enormous peace and almost the exhilaration of anticipating the meeting of, let's say, Anastasia again, and anticipating that. So it's there's the hard and there's the wonderful.
All right. Well, it's good talking to you, Kirk. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.